Hi guys, welcome back to the Physio Exchange with myself and Wade. Today we have a question from Patrick, who is an intern bio, and he has a patient who was diagnosed by another physio with tibialis posterior tendinopathy, and he would just like to know by us what would our approach be in managing this patient.
Well, tibialis posterior usually very common with athletes that repetitive load to that tendon. So runners, jumping sports, that repetitive jumping, basketball, netball, volleyball, very common as well. And that's just a repetitive load of a tendon. So basic tendinopathy is that the destructive phase of that tendon happens faster than the repair phase, and more so with athletes or individuals that overpronate on that foot complex, and like all tendinopathies, load, load, load. But remember, we want the porridge that's just right. If we do too much load, we flare that area. A porridge is a bit too hot, we kind of slow down that healing phase, or we irritate that tendon again. So finding the correct load that stimulates that area but doesn't flare it is key with the tendinopathy. Yeah.
And do you have any advice on how to start the load?
Well, lots of evidence on tendinopathies, and we're always trying to find out what is best, or research shows what's best, and is it isometric or eccentric or concentric. That's research, I always say, so you find what works for your individual athlete.
Yeah.
Whether that is isometric, I always like to sometimes start with isometric, but then I throw concentric and eccentric, loading that tendon depending if the porridge is just right.
How much they can actually
how much
tolerate.
they can handle. Yeah. Exactly. And then going from there, because a very important component of the tibialis posterior is that it's anticipation stabilization, so anticipatory stabilizers come in. That's what that does. So before we get to that terminal phase of the swing phase, before we get foot strike, it kind of prepares that system to hit the ground and stabilize for the rest of the kinetic chain. So once we got that system firing again, we have to re-educate that process. So things like force absorption, step down task, wide drops, pogo hops, just reinforcing that load after we've loaded that tendon is important to regain that ability of that tendon and muscle.
Yeah, and ultimately with your rehab is that you want the foot to be able to maintain a neutral position, the arch in a neutral position going forward, so that the injury doesn't recur.
Yeah, 100%. And usually with that muscle, when people say you have flat feet, usually training and retraining that muscle doesn't mean that aesthetically you're just going to have this arch all of a sudden. You will have flat feet. So if you walk in the sand, you're not going to have a footprint basically. But we want to know that actively that system can activate when it is needed, so that it keeps that system stable.
One thing I'd also like to mention is that some patients will come in and say, oh, so-and-so told me I have flat feet, I need orthotics. And I always say, if it's not bothering you, don't be adding things that's not needed. So if your flat feet are functional, you can do everything with them. There's no pain, you do not need orthotics. Unless it's limiting your function and interfering with your sport, then maybe you need to start looking at orthotics.
And then also before we go to orthotics, let's assess, does that system work to counter that overpronation, so let's first see if we strengthen that system, if it then before we go to a static kind of wedge, let's first see if actively and dynamically we can control that.
Instead of a passive form of treatment.
Perfect. Okay, guys, so thank you for joining the Physio Exchange once again. Remember, head to the website, www.cursebreakphysio.co.za. Head to the podcast link and drop us a question. See you next time on the Physio Exchange.